We get to the top management of Cipla with Umang Vohra, the Managing Director and Global CEO, live with us on today's edition of The Market. I have a lot to talk about, like I said, the recent underperformance, but also the way forward, R&D as the world normalizes post-COVID, what the non-COVID business, etc., is going to be looking like. We've seen a miss also when it comes to the fourth quarter earnings. Umang Vohra, welcome to ET Now. Thank you so much for this exclusive interview. So let's begin first with the times that we are in. We've seen in the last 2 years what has happened with pharmaceutical companies, led, of course, by Cipla. But as the world normalizes, can you talk to us about the post-COVID world, the learnings that we've seen, Cipla's transformation, and how you are preparing for the non-COVID business to get stronger?
I'd say 2 or 3 ways in which the world's definitely taking lessons from the post-COVID world. The first is around innovation. And I think innovation is fundamental. And this came to the fore during the crisis. And I think one of the things that everyone's probably noticed is that innovation can be very timely and that it doesn't necessarily, and regulators work with companies to ensure that it doesn't really take that amount of time that it can before. Plus the new technologies that have come out, whether it's the mRNA technology, whether it's the technology around vaccines with DNA subunits, whether it's technology around some of the antibodies, I think it's pretty phenomenal that the response times to a crisis like this are fundamental. So, that's number one. That's the first thing that we've learned. The second is the way that you connect with your customers, your patients, has gone through a huge change. It was being enabled by digital, but platforms have accelerated it. And we feel that this acceleration, whether it means that we connect with our doctors digitally, connect with our patients digitally, is something that probably is going to stay. Maybe not to the same extent as it did during the COVID world, but clearly the direction, I think that's something that we've set out to do. The third one is this whole journey where people have realized that, before you get ill, you're well. And after you get ill, you're well again. And how to manage this whole wellness piece is as important as how they manage the illness piece. And I think a lot of people have realized that if you stay well long enough, you don't get ill. And if you're focusing on your wellness, you get relatively better faster, post an illness. So I just want to think that this is going to be a trend that all of us are going to employ across the world, where we focus on our own wellness. And, we're at Cipla doing our best to make sure that we exploit all 3 of these.
Okay, so as you exploit all those 3, the other question is, and Cipla's been talking about this, a new growth frontier, or what you're calling wellness and innovation. Tell us more about this, and what is it really going to mean for Cipla's product mix?
So, certainly, I think let's start with innovation. I think in innovation, there is the innovation that we know and we are good at, and there is the innovation that we don't know but will change the world, right? So specifically, we were never big in mRNA. We didn't know this part of the world. We were never big in vaccines, right? We experimented with this part of the world earlier. We didn't know much about it. And antibodies, frankly, is not, is something that we had started, stopped, and now back into it again. So these 3 areas for us were really areas that we would consider, that we would look at for trying to change what we believe was our own innovation drive. So being a good innovator in the generic world is one part of our business. It's the bulk of our business. I'm here to do that. But I think we've opened up to the fact that mRNA is going to be a very significant part of how the world is going to innovate in the future. We believe that some of the other therapies out there, which are the antibodies, are equally important, and we're focusing on those as well. And I think from our perspective now, 20%, 25% of our innovation money is going to be spent on these areas that probably will begin to show us light 3 to 5 years later. And we'd like to imagine our role as a role where we innovate in India. right? As we become viewed as innovators in India, in as much as we get viewed as innovators outside. But the India market, what we need to innovate for is something that's closer to our heart. So we're deploying resources in these areas. We're deploying people in these areas. We're likely to open R&D laboratories to help us in these areas. So I think that's the innovation agenda, and the bulk of the work on the core business that continues. So we're going to have separate teams that drive these. They're going to be leaner because this type of innovation doesn't require the setup that we have for driving our core business. I want to come to wellness. You know, in wellness, there are about 4 categories that we're deeply passionate about. We're passionate about pain. We're passionate about vitamins and wellness, obviously. We're passionate about cough and cold. That's a very important area for us. And linked to that is smoking cessation. Linked to that is several of the other therapies that come. And then we're also passionate about gut health, right? So if you look at these 4 areas of our focus, it's quite clear that these would be areas that everyone's going to be bothered about. Look, the rationale for each of these is very clear.
Umang, Nikunj, good to connect with you. Now, the hallmark for Cipla over the years has been the respiratory business. The importance of the respiratory business, especially after COVID, has only intensified. Will that be the driving factor for Cipla in coming years, especially in the US market, given that that's where the large part of the respiratory launches are due?
I would like to believe so. I think there are 2 or 3 areas that we think would drive our future, and across the world, not just in the US. Respiratory and the new inhalers would. I think there are several of them that are losing patent protection in 2025, 2026, that time frame. Some will go before that, but we will try and be in every category possible. The second is peptide, the whole area of peptide injectables. We think that these formats are exciting because some of these are clinic administration, some of these are actually self-administration, especially the ones that are around diabetes, around other chronic conditions. And for us, I think, you know, over the last 2 to 3 years, we've been studying peptide profiles. We've been studying what impurities in these peptide products look like, because that is a big regulatory hurdle that you have to cross with the FDA to get an approval. So we're beginning to understand this science and we're beginning to assimilate it. So I think that would be the second category that would be important for us. And then we've spoken about antibodies, we've spoken about mRNA. So, you know, there's a lot in our pipeline, some which is more 3 years, as your question was, and some which is beyond 3 years from a horizon perspective.
So how do you see the margin profile moving up in the long term, considering that our research and development cost is at 7%?
Yeah, and I think it's in line with what we've guided. I think this year is with the procurement cost and the freight costs ramping up very significantly. I think this will normalize. It's a function of the 3 to 6 months. I think the world's already reacting. There's, you know, the central banks are raising rates across the world. I think that will contain some of the inflation. And my guess is that we would be back. I don't think we'd be back fully this year, but I think things will begin to normalize in 3 to 6 months on that side. My belief is that, you know, considering these current cost levels, considering our R&D at 7%, I think we're comfortable as a company operating at, you know, 21% on an annual basis. Now, some quarters, you know, we'd be slightly on the lower side. Some quarters we'll beat it because we also are a company that is seasonal in what we serve, especially in India. So I think that's broadly the range that we would have. We'd rather, you know, I don't think we're at the stage right now where we are focused on driving EBITDA to a level which is higher and higher every year. We are focused on ensuring that our growth continues to come. And therefore, we will continue to take calls to invest in our business. Some of those investments will be digital. Some of those investments will be in the areas of expansion of field force in some area. We believe India is a great opportunity in tier 2 to 6 towns for us to expand field force and drive penetration in those areas. So I think it's pretty evident that you know, the business will continue to rise as launches come. You know, we will continue to move up the margin curve, but we also want to sustainably build and develop the business we're focused on.
Right. Umang, if I could just talk about, how the India landscape is going to pan out from here. I mean, if we just look at the business environment, if trade generics, e-pharmacies, if they continue to grow, what kind of impact will it have on your India margins? And how is it that you are trying to protect yourself from, if I can call it, commoditization of branded generics?
Well, let me start by saying that today we see the e-pharmacy universe, and I would say centralized procurement distribution at about somewhere between 10 to 12% of the market. If I was to crystal ball gaze this and say, what does this trajectory mean in 3 years, right? Because I think some of these trajectories, if you take a very long-term outcome, it's very difficult to predict it. I think the 10 to 12 could become possibly 20 over the next 3 years. So it'll effectively double. So there's definitely a change in the consolidation in the market. However, I think the 80% of what's not consolidating is also growing, right? And it's growing not because of necessarily more pharmacies. It's growing because of consolidation. Pharmacies are merging with each other. And more centralized distribution is happening. So there is an equal response to this e-pharmacy penetration by the others. Now, what's going to be interesting is what happens in the tier 2 to 6 cities, because largely this battle is being fought in the metros. I think the tier 2 to 6 cities, if I was to just crystal ball gaze over the next 3 years, will continue to be the pharmacies, the brick and mortar pharmacies as we know it today. And that penetration is also going to be very significant in driving overall the amount that is sold through traditional pharmacy channels. I think the response to any consolidation of trade in the industry is for us to sit with each of these players, and offer products at an equitable rate to them as we offer to the rest of the trade, which is the regular brick and mortar pharmacies. However, the big thing that I've realized, especially in India, is that you have to, if you have big brands, it's difficult to substitute them, right? And I think a lot of the pharma companies have realized this, and everyone is in this mission of trying to make their brands more salient, more bigger. And we've seen this even in the FMCG side of the world. This is exactly how it plays out. If your brands are strong, no matter what the distribution format, you have that essentiality and you have that pricing power. And I think that's what we're trying to drive for our business as well.
Sure. But Umang, given the relevance of biologics and biosimilars in the current day and age, wanted to understand how is it that Cipla is going to participate in this, and especially in the developed markets?
So right now we're very focused, Pankaj, on specifically building the biologics platform around the respiratory side of our business. We might, introduce a few products on the oncology side, which is where this is growing as well. But on the respiratory side, I think we're pretty clear, because if we've chosen to offer the best lung leadership position and solutions for patients, we have to make sure that we follow how the therapy shifts. So as biologics becomes a larger share, as it started small, but as it becomes a more dominant share of this therapy, we will follow it, right? And so not only will we sell inhalers to the people, we'll also sell, a biomedicine. Now, how we're going to do it is obviously, a lot of people have had partnerships in bio. A lot of people have gone alone into it, and it's a huge capital deployment. We have a JV partner who is a very established manufacturer in India. And I think between the two of us, our selling capability, their manufacturing capability, we build a bio business based on that. And I think that's what we're doing at this point in time.
So I have two questions for you. As the world normalizes, and this is being talked a lot again about the US FDA inspections and re-inspections in India. We've seen what's happened in the last couple of days in more than one company. How important is this development? And the second one, with supply chains, that normalization, what's it going to mean for the US pricing? That has been coming down.
So let me answer the first one. I think more than we expect, we hope that a lot of us get audited, because it links to our growth, because our product approvals have to come. And some of these are in facilities that are pending inspections. I don't think the outcome is going to be vaguely different for the generic industry. It's not going to exacerbate to say now inspections are going to be tougher, or to say that inspections are going to be easier, right? I just think it's just normal course of business, like the FDA would audit earlier. I think the post-COVID world, we'll have to just imagine that. That's one. Having said that, a lot of companies have worked constantly through the 2 years or 3 years on their audit readiness, on their quality assertions. And so I'm expecting that when the FDA does visit, that they will hopefully also recognize some aspects of that. I think the other, so it's normal course of business, right, from an audit perspective. The second aspect is, I'm sorry, I forgot, what was the second aspect? Could you remind me on that, please?
Yes, I was asking you about the US pricing, and it's been coming down, and now that supply chains are being normalized, what's the way forward?
Yeah, and I think on this, supply chain is a constantly moving target. I would like to say this is that the generic market will always have 5 to 10% erosion every year, and everyone has to factor that. We've certainly factored it, and I think it's clear that we are likely to see this erosion. I don't think the supply chain has beginning to show impact in the US as yet, but I think with the current inflation, etc., I think it's probably, we are hoping that the erosion will not be as significant.
Umang, so great having you today on ET Now. Thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking with us.